Howdy! If you're following along with my presentation, you'll see that I have a few design fails on the first few slides. The ones that stood out to me was the door that said pool but didn't have any handles, the stairs that are floating for some reason, and then the toilet that had a wall built through it. I mean, come on, these architects had one job. Now I share these one job memes to give you a laugh tonight, but also to tie into my so what statement. Now the architects in those pictures had one job, but we also have one job, and we're currently failing at it. Our job as humans on this planet is to be conscious about our impact on the environment and live sustainably so that the planet can continue to provide for generations to come. Now this is a stance I'd like to argue because it's important for us. We all share the same planet, so why not take care of it? And whether you believe it or not, the way we treat our planet has a lasting impact on everyone. That brings me to my topic of eco-architecture. Now you should be at my title screen now, where it says eco-architecture. I'm going to argue my stance by sharing the benefits of eco-architecture, including some ways that it's actually a little more harmful than helpful, and proposing that maybe restoring old buildings would be a better option for our future. Now my first point is that eco-architecture is beneficial for our environment. Eco-architecture is defined by the Environmental Encyclopedia as the practice of designing buildings which create living environments that work to minimize human use of resources. To summarize this in my own words, architects are striving to create buildings that consume energy but also produce energy, and they also leave no impact on the environment. The majority of these buildings also include plants in the design because plants take in a lot of carbon dioxide and it helps cleanse the atmosphere. It also helps restore green spaces that were torn up from the construction. The Commission of Environmental Cooperation recently published stats that I included in one of these slides so you can read along and understand the depth of the issue. Buildings take in a lot of energy and we don't realize it. In the following viewpoint, the CEC says that eco-architecture can limit the ecological impacts of buildings throughout construction, use, and demolition, address climate and emissions by reducing the energy consumed for lighting, heating, and cooling, and also reusable and recyclable components can cut construction waste and the use of raw materials. The CEC also stated that green building on average currently reduces energy by 30%, carbon emissions by 35%, and water use by 30 to 50%. This is a huge step in the right direction, and that shows that architecture does in fact benefit the environment. Now that brings me to my second point, which I would like to draw attention to how eco-architecture can actually be more harmful than helpful. Many architects believe that they are helping, but they're losing sight of the true issue. For example, while buildings are large carbon emitters, so is transportation. Gary Stevens, a former professor of architecture and design science at the University of Sydney, argues that green designers are out of touch, and if the architects so passionately advocating for sustainable design really wished to contribute to the cause, they would not drive a car. Now I understand what Gary is saying, because while we're trying to build buildings that help reduce carbon emissions, we're driving to and from these buildings and just adding more to it. Another issue with eco-architecture is the fact that in order to build a green building, you have to clear the lot, which destroys the environment, and also large amounts of resources get used. The land that gets cleared is then covered with a concrete slab, and construction also produces a lot of waste. So there's a lot of issues here that environmentalists would probably want to avoid, right? Jane Powell is a renovator of old homes and the author of architectural design books. Powell states that green developers consume enormous resources, demolish sturdy historic homes, and discard valuable materials to build cheap, faddish construction projects that will not last. Oof. Green or not, constructing new buildings is harmful for the environment. Even though the building begins to give back to the environment once it's built, construction either way is harmful. These are the ways that eco-architecture does not fix the root of the problem, and seems to be more harmful than helpful. That brings me to my last point, which is how restoring historical buildings could be a more important part of our sustainable future than we think. Jane Powell, who I mentioned earlier, also advocates for the conservation of old buildings through maintenance and rehabilitation. Powell states that green building can help, but in reality, the greenest thing we can do is continue the life of an existing building by restoring or rehabilitating it. I want to bring restoration to your attention because it could actually be the best option for us in the long run. There are so many buildings that have been abandoned that are still in really good condition, but they're also contributing to these carbon emission stats. And if we're building new buildings and not fixing the old buildings, we're not fixing the root of the issue. Jane Powell brings to light that almost always it's a historic building that is torn down, possibly one that was abandoned or neglected, or simply had the fault of being too small or not architecturally distinguished. There are actually a lot of benefits to restoring an old building. The benefits are that there is a retention of history when repurposing historic buildings. They are already made out of durable, high-quality materials. There's no need for demolishing what is already there. We can use it instead. And rehabilitation costs less than new construction. Now, I'm not saying that eco-architecture is not the way to go, because I do believe that it's the future of architecture. But think about it. If we keep building eco-friendly buildings and ignore the existing buildings, we're not solving any problems. We need to change our focus on making existing buildings environmentally friendly and repurposing them so that they can use resources wisely and we don't waste anything on new construction. To summarize my points, when done correctly, eco-architecture is beneficial for the environment. There are ways eco-architecture is more harmful than helpful, and that can change. And also, restoring historic buildings is the solution for a more sustainable future. Now, do you remember the one-job memes that I showed in the beginning? Well, architects have jobs of designing sustainably, but we have jobs of living sustainably. It can't start with architects until it starts with us. Thank you.